The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as William stood by the window of his private study, watching the gardeners tend to the rose garden below. His fingers traced the edges of a letter that had arrived 3 days earlier, its contents weighing heavily on his mind. The elegant handwriting belonged to his former art teacher, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, who had taught him watercolor painting during some of the most difficult years of his youth. Eleanor had been more than just an instructor. During the turbulent period following his mother's death, when teenage William struggled with grief and the overwhelming expectations of royal duty, she had provided a sanctuary of creativity and understanding. Her small studio in the village of Tetbury had become his refuge, a place where he could express emotions through brushstrokes rather than words, where tears could fall freely without the watchful eyes of the press or palace officials. The letter bore devastating news. Eleanor, now 83 years old, was in the final stages of cancer. She had written to inform him that she had perhaps weeks, possibly days, remaining. What struck William most profoundly was not just the announcement of her illness, but her gentle request. She asked if he might visit her one last time, not as the Prince of Wales, but simply as William, the young man she had watched grow through art and shared silence. Kate found him there an hour later, still holding the letter, his breakfast untouched on the nearby table. She approached quietly, recognizing the particular stillness that overcame her husband when memories of loss surfaced. Without speaking, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder, feeling the tension beneath his formal jacket. "It's Eleanor," William said softly, handing Kate the letter. "She's dying." Kate read the carefully crafted words, each sentence revealing Eleanor's grace even in the face of mortality. The older woman had written about her gratitude for their friendship, her pride in watching William mature into the man he had become, and her hope that their final meeting might bring him the same peace that teaching him had brought to her life. "She means a great deal to you," Kate observed, settling into the chair beside him. William nodded, his gaze returning to the gardens. "When everyone else wanted to teach me about duty and protocol, Eleanor taught me about beauty. She showed me that it was acceptable to feel deeply, to process grief through creation rather than suppression. I'm not sure I would have survived those years without her studio to escape to." The challenge lay not just in the emotional weight of the visit, but in the practical complexities that surrounded any movement of the royal family. Security protocols, press management, and official schedules created barriers around even the most personal moments. William's private secretary had already begun the delicate process of arranging what would need to appear as an impromptu visit to avoid media attention, while ensuring proper protection. Eleanor lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of Tetbury, the same village where she had maintained her teaching studio decades earlier. The cottage had been her retirement home, surrounded by the same English countryside that had inspired countless painting lessons. Her niece, Sarah, had moved in to provide care during Eleanor's final months, transforming the space into a peaceful hospice environment. As William and Kate discussed the logistics of the visit, they were joined by their children's voices echoing from the garden below. George, Charlotte, and Louis were playing with their beloved dog, their laughter carrying through the morning air. William watched them, thinking about the lessons Eleanor had taught him about finding joy amid sorrow, about the importance of experiencing beauty even during life's most difficult chapters. "I want to bring something meaningful," William told Kate as they planned the visit. "Something that honors what she gave me." Kate understood immediately. Over the years, William had continued painting as a private hobby, creating watercolors that captured moments of family life, landscapes from their travels, and scenes from their children's childhood. His techniques still bore the influence of Eleanor's patient instruction, the careful attention to light and shadow that she had instilled in him during those therapeutic afternoons in her studio. The decision was made to bring one of his recent paintings, a watercolor depicting the view from Amer Hall during the golden hour of sunset. The piece captured not just the visual beauty of the Norfolk countryside, but the sense of home and peace that William had found in family life. It seemed a fitting tribute to the woman who had taught him that art could be a bridge between pain and healing. Preparations for the visit required careful coordination. The protection officers would need to scout the location, ensuring that Eleanor's cottage could be safely accessed without disrupting the quiet neighborhood. The timing would need to coincide with William's official schedule in a way that appeared natural, avoiding the appearance of a rushed or overly formal state visit. Eleanor's niece Sarah was contacted discreetly to arrange the visit. Her response revealed the profound impact the planned visit would have on Eleanor, who despite her weakness had begun preparing for William's arrival with the same careful attention she had once given to setting up her art studio. Sarah described how Eleanor had asked to be dressed in her favorite lavender cardigan, the same one she had worn during many of their painting sessions years earlier. The night before the visit, William found himself unable to sleep. He walked through the quiet corridors of their residence, pausing at family photographs that captured moments of joy and celebration. But his thoughts kept returning to Eleanor's studio, to the afternoons when she had guided his hands as he learned to capture water reflections in watercolor, when she had listened without judgment as he worked through his teenage confusion and grief. Kate discovered him in the early morning hours, sitting in their private sitting room with several of his paintings spread across the coffee table. Each piece revealed the technical foundations that Eleanor had provided, the understanding of color and composition that had become second nature through her patient teaching. "She'll be so proud to see how your work has developed," Kate said, settling beside him. William picked up the Norfolk landscape he planned to present to Eleanor. "I keep thinking about something she told me when I was 16. I had become frustrated with a particularly difficult painting, and she said that the most beautiful art comes not from technical perfection, but from the courage to put genuine emotion onto canvas." The irony was not lost on either of them that William, who had spent his adult life maintaining careful emotional control in public settings, had found his most authentic expression through the private act of painting. Eleanor had given him permission to feel deeply at a time when royal expectations demanded emotional restraint. As dawn approached, William and Kate finalized their preparations for the visit. The painting was carefully wrapped in protective covering, ready for transport. William selected personal photographs of their family to share with Eleanor, images that would show her how the scared teenager she had once taught had found happiness and purpose. The morning of the visit arrived with typical English weather, overcast skies that threatened rain, but held off long enough for their journey to Tetbury. William found himself unusually nervous as their car traveled through the countryside, past landscapes that looked remarkably similar to the scenes Eleanor had once encouraged him to capture in watercolor. Kate noticed his fidgeting, the way he repeatedly checked his watch and adjusted his jacket. She reached for his hand, providing the silent support that had become their natural communication during moments of emotional difficulty. "What if she doesn't remember our conversations the way I do?" William asked quietly. "What if illness has changed her?" Kate squeezed his hand gently. "Love and kindness leave lasting impressions, even when memory fades. She'll remember what matters most." The cottage came into view as their car rounded a familiar curve in the village road. It was exactly as William remembered from his youth, a stone cottage with climbing roses around the door and window boxes filled with the same varieties of flowers that Eleanor had once painted during their lessons. The sight brought an unexpected rush of memories, afternoons when this place had represented safety and understanding. Sarah greeted them at the door, her eyes bright with gratitude despite the strain of recent months. She led them through a small sitting room filled with Eleanor's paintings, landscapes, and portraits that captured decades of artistic development. The cottage smelled of lavender and fresh flowers, creating an atmosphere of peace that immediately reminded William why this place had once felt like sanctuary. Eleanor was waiting in her favorite armchair by the window, positioned to catch the natural light that had always been essential to her artistic work. Though illness had diminished her physical strength, her eyes remained alert and warm, brightening immediately when she saw William and Kate enter the room. "My dear boy," she said softly, extending a thin hand that still bore faint traces of paint beneath the fingernails. You've grown into such a distinguished gentleman. William knelt beside her chair, taking her hand in both of his. The gesture was natural, unguarded in a way that his public appearances rarely allowed. Eleanor, I brought someone very special to meet you. This is Kate, my wife. Eleanor's gaze moved to Kate with obvious delight. The beautiful Catherine I've read so much about. I can see why you captured his heart, my dear. There's kindness in your eyes. Kate settled into a nearby chair, immediately putting Eleanor at ease with her genuine warmth. William has told me so much about you, Mrs. Hartwell, about how you taught him to see beauty in difficult times. Eleanor smiled, her gaze shifting between William and Kate. He was such a serious young man when he first came to my studio, carrying so much sadness, trying so hard to be strong for everyone else. Art became his way of expressing what words couldn't capture. The conversation flowed naturally, 3 generations sharing stories about creativity, family, and the unexpected paths that life creates. Eleanor spoke about her years of teaching, the students who had touched her life, and the particular joy she had found in watching William discover his artistic voice during those crucial teenage years. William presented the Norfolk landscape he had brought, carefully unwrapping the watercolor as Eleanor's eyes widened with appreciation. Her hands trembled slightly as she examined the painting, recognizing immediately the techniques she had taught him decades earlier, now refined through years of private practice. The light, she whispered, tracing the air above the painted sunset. You've captured the exact quality of evening light that we used to practice together. Do you remember those sessions when we worked on understanding golden hour shadows? William nodded, his voice catching slightly. Every time I paint a sunset, I hear your voice guiding me through the color transitions. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of joy rather than sadness. This is the most beautiful gift you could have given me. To know that something I shared with you has continued to bring beauty into your life, has become part of how you see and experience the world. The afternoon stretched peacefully, filled with shared memories and gentle laughter. Eleanor showed them photographs from William's teenage years, images of him concentrating intently over his easel, paint-stained and completely absorbed in his artistic work. Kate was fascinated to see this glimpse of her husband's younger self, the vulnerability and creativity that had been nurtured in this small cottage. As the light began to fade, Eleanor grew more tired but remained alert and engaged. She spoke about her pride in watching William mature into his royal role while maintaining the sensitivity and emotional depth that had drawn her to him as a student. Her words carried the weight of someone who had witnessed firsthand the struggle between personal authenticity and public expectation. "Promise me something," Eleanor said as the visit drew to a close, her hand still clasped in William's. "Promise me you'll continue painting, not because you have to, but because it keeps part of your heart free. The world needs leaders who understand beauty, who can find hope in dark times." William promised, understanding that this commitment represented more than maintaining a hobby. It was a promise to honor the part of himself that Eleanor had helped nurture, the capacity for deep feeling and creative expression that had sustained him through loss and change. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor presented William with a small gift wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a set of watercolor brushes, the same brand she had used during their lessons years earlier. Each brush showed signs of use, the handles worn smooth by decades of artistic creation. "These are my teaching brushes," she explained. "I want you to have them so that every time you paint, you'll remember that art is about more than technique. It's about having the courage to put your authentic self onto canvas." The goodbye was tender and prolonged, filled with the understanding that this meeting represented both an ending and a celebration. Eleanor blessed their marriage, offered her hopes for their children, and expressed her gratitude for the unexpected gift of seeing William again after so many years. As their car pulled away from the cottage, William turned for one last look at the place that had shaped so much of his emotional development. Eleanor stood framed in her window, waving goodbye with a smile that radiated peace and fulfillment. The image would remain with him forever, a final portrait of the woman who had taught him that strength could coexist with sensitivity, that leadership required the ability to feel deeply rather than suppress emotion. The drive home was quiet, both William and Kate processing the profound experience they had shared. The visit had been more than a goodbye. It had been a recognition of the ways that love and guidance can transcend time, continuing to influence and inspire long after the original lessons have ended. That evening, William set up his easel in their private sitting room, arranging Eleanor's brushes alongside his own painting supplies. Kate watched as he began a new watercolor, not of any particular scene, but of colors and light that seemed to capture the emotions of their afternoon together. The painting emerged slowly, layer by layer, each brushstroke informed by techniques learned decades earlier in a small studio where a grieving teenager had discovered that beauty could coexist with sorrow, that art could be a bridge between pain and healing. The morning following their visit to Eleanor brought an unexpected phone call that would transform William's private goodbye into something much larger. Sarah's voice carried both urgency and wonder as she explained that despite Eleanor's weakened condition, their visit had energized her in remarkable ways. She had spent the evening examining William's painting with a magnifying glass, pointing out specific techniques to Sarah while sharing stories about their old painting sessions. "She's asking for her easel," Sarah told William during their early morning conversation. "She wants to paint one final piece, something she says she needs to create while the memory of yesterday is still fresh in her mind." William felt a mixture of joy and concern. The idea that Eleanor felt inspired enough to paint again filled him with happiness, but he worried about her physical strength. Sarah assured him that Eleanor seemed more alert than she had been in weeks, as if the connection with William had awakened something essential within her spirit. Kate listened to William's side of the conversation while preparing breakfast for their children. She could see the impact Eleanor's request was having on him, the way his face lit up with the possibility that their visit might have given his former teacher one final creative moment. When he hung up the phone, Kate immediately understood what he was thinking. "You want to go back," she said, not as a question, but as a recognition of what his heart was telling him. William nodded slowly. "If she's strong enough to paint, I want to be there. I want to witness her creating one last piece, to honor what she taught me by being present for her final artistic moment." The logistics proved even more complex than their first visit. William's schedule was packed with official engagements, including a charity event that evening and meetings with government officials the following morning. His private secretary initially balked at the idea of a second unscheduled trip to Tetbury, particularly one that could potentially extend for several hours if Eleanor's painting session proceeded slowly. But Kate intervened with the quiet determination that had characterized her support throughout their marriage. She spoke privately with the private secretary, arranging for William's afternoon appointments to be rescheduled and his evening commitment to be handled by video conference from a nearby location. Her protection of William's emotional needs had become second nature, an instinctive understanding of when royal duty needed to accommodate human connection. Meanwhile, in her cottage, Eleanor was experiencing what Sarah would later describe as her final renaissance. The elderly woman had awakened with more energy than she had possessed in months, her mind clear and focused on the artistic vision that had emerged from William's visit. She directed Sarah in setting up her easel by the window, positioning it to catch the same natural light that had illuminated countless painting sessions throughout her teaching career. Eleanor's choice of subject matter surprised her niece. Rather than painting a landscape or still life, she was creating what appeared to be a portrait, though not of any visible model. Her brush moved with surprising steadiness as she layered colors that seemed to emerge from memory rather than observation. The painting was taking shape as something deeply personal, a visual representation of emotions rather than physical reality. When William and Kate arrived for their second visit, they found Eleanor completely absorbed in her work. She wore a paint-stained apron over her lavender cardigan, her hair pulled back in the same practical style she had maintained during her teaching years. The concentration on her face was absolute, The same intense, focused William remembered from their lessons when she would demonstrate a particularly complex technique. "Don't interrupt her," Sarah whispered as she led them into the sitting room. "She's been painting for 3 hours straight, barely stopping for sips of tea. It's like watching a master at work one final time." William and Kate settled quietly into chairs positioned where they could observe Eleanor's process without disrupting her concentration. Watching her work brought back powerful memories for William of afternoons spent in her studio, when he had been amazed by her ability to create beauty from nothing more than pigment and water. Her technique remained sure despite her physical frailty, each brushstroke deliberate and informed by decades of artistic experience. The painting gradually revealed itself as something extraordinary and unexpected. Rather than a traditional portrait, Eleanor was creating what appeared to be a visual representation of teaching itself. The canvas showed hands guiding other hands, brushes shared between generations, the transfer of knowledge and love through creative collaboration. The color palette moved from darker tones representing struggle and uncertainty into progressively lighter shades, symbolizing understanding and growth. As Eleanor worked, she began speaking softly, seemingly to herself, but loud enough for William and Kate to hear. Her words formed a kind of meditation on the nature of teaching and learning, on the unexpected ways that relationships can transcend their original boundaries to become lasting sources of inspiration. "Teaching is never really about the subject matter," Eleanor murmured as she added delicate details to the painted hands. "It's about recognizing the potential in another person and creating space for that potential to flourish. Every student teaches the teacher something new about the miracle of human creativity." William felt tears gathering as he listened to Eleanor articulate what their relationship had meant from her perspective. He had always focused on what she had given him during those difficult teenage years, but her words revealed that the exchange had been reciprocal. His willingness to be vulnerable, to bring his grief into her studio and transform it through art, had apparently enriched her understanding of teaching as much as her guidance had shaped his emotional development. Kate reached for William's hand as they continued watching Eleanor work. The scene before them felt sacred, a master artist creating her final piece while surrounded by love and appreciation. The natural light streaming through the cottage windows seemed to collaborate with Eleanor's brushwork, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and transcendent. Eleanor's painting technique evolved as the piece progressed. Her initial careful strokes gave way to more bold and expressive applications of color, as if the act of creation was liberating some final reservoir of artistic energy. The painted hands began to seem almost alive, reaching across generations to connect past and future, teacher and student, one human heart to another. "William," Eleanor said suddenly, breaking her meditative silence. "Come here, dear boy. I want you to add something to this painting." William looked uncertain, hesitant to intrude on what was clearly a deeply personal artistic statement. But Eleanor's gentle insistence overcame his reluctance. She guided him to stand beside her easel, pressing a clean brush into his hand with fingers that trembled slightly, but remained purposeful. "Add your mark here," she instructed, pointing to a space in the painting where the hands seemed to be reaching toward something just beyond the canvas edge. "Paint whatever represents hope to you, whatever keeps you moving forward when times are difficult." William hesitated, the brush poised above the canvas. The weight of the moment felt enormous, the responsibility of contributing to what might be Eleanor's final artistic creation. But as he looked at the painting, inspiration struck him with sudden clarity. Using techniques she had taught him decades earlier, he began painting a small bird in flight, its wings catching light as it soared upward beyond the reaching hands. Eleanor watched his addition with tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "Perfect," she whispered. "The student becomes the teacher, the cycle continues." That bird represents every moment when art helps us transcend our limitations and touch something eternal. The collaboration between teacher and former student created a piece that was more than the sum of its parts. Eleanor's meditation on teaching and learning combined with William's symbol of hope and transcendence to produce a painting that captured the essence of human connection through creative expression. The work vibrated with emotional authenticity in a way that formal portraits rarely achieved. As Eleanor stepped back from the completed painting, her energy seemed to ebb noticeably. The extraordinary focus that had sustained her through hours of intensive work was giving way to the physical reality of her condition. Sarah immediately moved to her aunt's side, helping her settle in her favorite armchair while Kate prepared tea for everyone. "This painting is my gift to you," Eleanor told William as she caught her breath. "But more than that, it's my gift to everyone who believes in the power of art to heal and connect us. I want you to share this story, to let people know that beauty can emerge from the most unexpected places when we have the courage to remain open to it." William understood immediately what Eleanor was asking of him. She wasn't simply giving him a painting. She was entrusting him with a message about the importance of creativity, vulnerability, and human connection. The story of their relationship, from his grief-stricken teenage years to this moment of collaborative creation, carried lessons that extended far beyond their personal experience. As the afternoon progressed, Eleanor shared more about her philosophy of teaching and art. She spoke about the students who had touched her life, the moments when creativity had bridged differences in age, background, and experience. Her words painted a picture of art as a universal language, capable of expressing truths that conventional communication often failed to capture. "Every person has the capacity for creative expression," Eleanor said, her voice growing softer as fatigue increased. "Society often tells us that art is only for the specially talented, but that's nonsense. Art is for anyone brave enough to put their authentic self into the world, whether through painting, writing, music, or simply the way they choose to live their life with intention and beauty." Kate found herself deeply moved by Eleanor's perspective. As someone who had married into a world of rigid protocol and public scrutiny, she recognized the courage required to maintain authenticity under pressure. Eleanor's words offered a different way of thinking about the challenges they faced, reframing public life as an opportunity for artistic expression rather than a constraint on personal freedom. The conversation naturally turned to legacy and the ways that influence continues long after formal relationships have ended. Eleanor spoke about former students who had gone on to become teachers themselves, carrying her methods and philosophy into new contexts and new generations. She described the ripple effects of education, how a single moment of understanding or encouragement could shape entire lives in unexpected ways. "You've carried my teaching far beyond anything I ever imagined possible," Eleanor told William. "Every time you've used art to process emotion, every moment when you've chosen sensitivity over callousness in your public role, you've been extending the lessons we learned together in my studio." William realized that Eleanor was right. His approach to leadership, his emphasis on mental health awareness, his ability to connect authentically with people facing trauma or loss all traced back to the emotional intelligence he had developed through their artistic collaboration. She had taught him that strength included rather than excluded the capacity for deep feeling. As evening approached, Eleanor's strength continued to wane, but her spirits remained remarkably high. The completion of the collaborative painting seemed to have provided closure, a sense of artistic and emotional fulfillment that transcended her physical limitations. She spoke about feeling ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that her influence would continue through the people she had taught and inspired. The second goodbye proved even more poignant than the first. Eleanor presented William with a collaborative painting, insisting that it belonged in his family, where it could continue to inspire future generations. She made him promise to tell their children about the importance of artistic expression to ensure that creativity remained valued even within the structures of royal life. "Art doesn't make us weak," Eleanor said in her final words to William that day. It makes us more completely human. Never forget that your capacity for beauty and feeling is part of what makes you an effective leader. The drive home carried a different energy than their previous departure from the cottage. While sadness remained at the knowledge of Eleanor's approaching death, there was also a profound sense of completion and celebration. The collaborative painting secured carefully in their vehicle represented more than a final artistic creation. It was a testament to the enduring power of human connection across time and circumstance. That evening, William set up the collaborative painting in their private sitting room, where the family could see it daily. When their children asked about the beautiful artwork, William and Kate found themselves sharing stories about creativity, learning, and the importance of finding mentors who believe in your potential even when you struggle to see it yourself. The painting's presence in their home became a daily reminder of Eleanor's teachings, but also of the broader truth she had helped William understand. Art and beauty weren't luxuries to be enjoyed when more serious matters allowed time. They were essential elements of what made life worth living, sources of strength rather than distraction from responsibility. As William prepared for sleep that night, he reflected on the extraordinary gift of witnessing Eleanor's final artistic creation. The experience had reinforced his understanding that genuine farewells often include celebration alongside sadness, that endings can be beginnings when they're approached with love and intention. Eleanor was teaching him about dying with the same grace she had once taught him about living, showing that departure could be its own form of art when approached with courage and authenticity. 3 days after the collaborative painting session, Sarah's phone call came at dawn. Her voice was steady, but carried the weight of finality as she informed William that Eleanor had passed peacefully during the night, surrounded by the artwork that had defined her life. She had died as she had lived, with dignity and grace, her final hours spent admiring the painting she and William had created together. William received the news while reviewing his morning briefings, the mundane details of royal scheduling suddenly, seeming insignificant against the reality of Eleanor's death. Kate found him standing motionless in his study, the phone still in his hand, his face reflecting the complex mixture of grief and gratitude that accompanies the loss of someone who has profoundly shaped your life. "She's gone," he said simply, and Kate understood immediately. She moved to embrace him, providing the physical comfort that had become their wordless communication during moments of loss. William had lost mentors before, but Eleanor's death felt different because it represented the end of his last direct connection to the person he had been during those transformative teenage years. Sarah's call had included Eleanor's final wishes, requests that would challenge conventional royal protocol while honoring the unconventional relationship that had shaped both their lives. Eleanor had asked that William speak at her memorial service, not as the Prince of Wales delivering formal remarks, but as her former student sharing personal memories about art, learning, and the courage required for authentic human connection. More surprising was Eleanor's request that their collaborative painting be displayed at the service, despite the intensely personal nature of the piece. She wanted her final artwork to be seen by the community that had supported her teaching career, believing that the story of continued learning and growth would inspire others facing their own farewells and transitions. William's private secretary initially expressed concern about the memorial service requests. Royal family members rarely spoke at private funerals, and when they did, their remarks were typically brief and formal. The idea of William delivering a personal eulogy while displaying collaborative artwork ventured into unprecedented territory that could attract unwanted media attention. But William's response was immediate and unwavering. "Eleanor gave me permission to be fully human during the most difficult period of my life. I'm not going to abandon that authenticity now when it's my turn to honor her memory." Kate supported his decision completely, recognizing that William's relationship with Eleanor represented something essential about his character that needed to be acknowledged rather than hidden. She worked with the private secretary to arrange security and logistics that would allow William to fulfill Eleanor's requests while maintaining appropriate dignity and privacy for the memorial service. The news of Eleanor's death began to spread through the small networks of people whose lives she had touched. Former students, fellow teachers, and community members who had known her reached out to Sarah with memories and condolences. Each story revealed different facets of Eleanor's character, building a picture of someone who had consistently used art as a bridge between people across generations and circumstances. Among the responses was a letter from the headmaster of the school, where Eleanor had taught for 3 decades. He described her as the teacher that other teachers consulted when facing particularly challenging students, the colleague who somehow found ways to reach young people that others had given up on. Her classroom had been a sanctuary for students struggling with everything from learning differences to family trauma. William found these stories both comforting and illuminating. His experience with Eleanor had felt uniquely personal, but the accumulating memories revealed that her gift for creating safe spaces where people could explore their creativity and vulnerability had been consistently applied throughout her career. He had been one of many young people who had benefited from her particular combination of artistic skill and emotional wisdom. Preparing for the memorial service required William to articulate what Eleanor had meant to him in ways he had never attempted before. The eulogy couldn't simply recount facts about their relationship. It needed to capture the essence of what she had taught him about art, life, and the courage required for authentic leadership. Kate helped him work through multiple drafts of his remarks, serving as both editor and emotional support as he struggled to find words that honored Eleanor's impact without diminishing the privacy that had made their relationship so meaningful. The challenge was expressing profound personal gratitude while maintaining the dignity appropriate to both his royal position and Eleanor's memory. The collaborative painting presented its own challenges. The piece was deeply personal, created during Eleanor's final hours, and infused with symbolism that might not be immediately apparent to casual observers. William and Kate decided to prepare a simple explanation that could accompany the artwork, providing context without over-explaining the emotional significance of the teacher-student collaboration. As the memorial service approached, William found himself returning repeatedly to Eleanor's brushes, the worn wooden handles that represented decades of artistic creation and instruction. He had been using them in his own painting sessions, discovering that their familiar weight and balance somehow connected him to Eleanor's creative process even after her death. The night before the memorial, William completed a small watercolor using Eleanor's brushes, a simple landscape of the view from her cottage window. The painting wasn't intended for display or sharing. It was his private way of continuing their artistic dialogue, of demonstrating that her teaching would remain alive in his continued creative expression. The memorial service was held at the small church in Tetbury, where Eleanor had worshipped quietly for decades. The gathering was intimate, perhaps 50 people who had known her in various capacities, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a family celebration than a formal funeral. William and Kate arrived early, wanted to spend a few private moments with a collaborative painting before other mourners gathered. The artwork had been positioned near the altar where natural light could illuminate the painted hands reaching across generations. Seeing the piece in the sacred space of the church, William was struck by how appropriate Eleanor's final creation seemed for a farewell celebration. The painting's meditation on teaching and learning felt like a perfect representation of the eternal human desire to connect across time through shared knowledge and love. As the service began, William noticed the diversity of ages represented among Eleanor's mourners. Former students who were now middle-aged adults sat beside recent retirees who had been her teaching colleagues, while younger people who appeared to be current art students clustered near elderly community members who had known her for decades. The gathering itself seemed to embody Eleanor's belief in art as a universal language capable of bridging differences in background and experience. The service included musical performances by some of Eleanor's former students, pieces that range from classical selections to contemporary folk songs that she had apparently loved. Each performance revealed different aspects of her influence, the way she had encouraged creative expression across multiple disciplines rather than limiting herself to visual arts instruction. When William rose to deliver his eulogy, the church fell completely silent. The gathered mourners understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented, a member of the royal family speaking not as a representative of the crown, but as a person whose life had been profoundly shaped by the deceased. William's opening words immediately established the personal nature of his remarks. "Eleanor Hartwell saved my life," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. Not dramatically or obviously, but quietly and persistently, the way that great teachers save students by showing them possibilities they couldn't see for themselves. William's eulogy traced the arc of his relationship with Eleanor from their first meeting through their final collaborative painting session. He spoke about arriving at her studio as an angry, grieving teenager who felt disconnected from everyone around him. He described Eleanor's patience as she taught him to channel emotion into artistic expression, her wisdom in recognizing that creativity could be therapeutic rather than merely decorative. "Eleanor taught me that strength and sensitivity aren't opposites," William continued. "She showed me that the ability to feel deeply, to be moved by beauty, to express emotion honestly are essential qualities for anyone who hopes to connect authentically with other people. Those lessons didn't just help me survive adolescence. They shaped my understanding of what it means to serve others." The congregation listened with rapt attention as William described specific memories. Eleanor's gentle correction of his brush technique while allowing him to work through anger on canvas. Her preparation of tea during their sessions, creating rituals that made their time together feel sacred rather than clinical. Her encouragement when he felt his artistic efforts were inadequate, consistently redirecting his attention from technical perfection to emotional honesty. William's description of their recent visits brought tears to many in attendance. He spoke about Eleanor's continued vitality despite her illness, her excitement about creating one final painting, and the generosity that had led her to make their goodbye a collaborative artistic statement rather than simply an ending. "Our final painting together captures something essential about Eleanor's approach to teaching," William explained, gesturing toward the displayed artwork. "She believed that the best education happens when student and teacher learn from each other, when knowledge flows in both directions, when creativity becomes a shared exploration rather than a one-way transfer of information." The eulogy's conclusion focused on legacy and continuity, themes that Eleanor had emphasized during their final conversations. William spoke about the ripple effects of good teaching, the ways that inspiration and encouragement continue influencing people long after formal lessons have ended. He committed to ensuring that Eleanor's approach to education, her belief in the healing power of artistic expression, would continue through his own advocacy for arts education and mental health awareness. Eleanor's final gift to me was showing that farewell can be its own form of art when approached with love and intention, William said as he concluded his remarks. "She demonstrated that endings become beginnings when we face them with courage and use them as opportunities to express our deepest truths. Her teaching will continue every time someone chooses vulnerability over defensiveness, creativity over conformity, connection over isolation." The service concluded with a viewing of the collaborative painting, allowing mourners to examine the artwork that had emerged from William and Eleanor's final session together. Sarah provided gentle explanations of the symbolism, helping visitors understand the painted hands, the progression from darker to lighter tones, and the significance of the bird that William had added as his contribution to Eleanor's final creation. Many of the former students approached William after the service, sharing their own memories of Eleanor's impact on their lives. Each story reinforced the picture of a teacher who had consistently seen potential where others saw problems, who had used art as a bridge to reach students that conventional methods couldn't help. Several mentioned that they had continued painting or pursuing creative expression specifically because of Eleanor's encouragement during crucial moments in their development. One former student, now a successful architect, spoke about how Eleanor's emphasis on seeing beauty in unexpected places had influenced his professional approach to design. Another, working as a therapist with traumatized children, described using Eleanor's art therapy techniques in her current practice. The conversations revealed the far-reaching influence of Eleanor's philosophy, the ways her understanding of creativity as healing had continued spreading through multiple generations and professions. As the memorial gathering gradually dispersed, William and Kate spent additional time with Sarah, helping her plan for the preservation of Eleanor's artistic legacy. The cottage contained decades of artwork, both Eleanor's own pieces and work by students she had taught over the years. Sarah wanted to ensure that the collection would be properly archived and made available to researchers interested in art education and therapeutic applications of creativity. They discussed the possibility of establishing a small scholarship fund in Eleanor's name, providing art supplies and instruction for young people facing difficult circumstances similar to those William had experienced. The fund would embody Eleanor's belief that creativity should be accessible to anyone willing to explore their authentic emotions through artistic expression. The collaborative painting would return home with William and Kate, where it would continue serving as a daily reminder of Eleanor's influence. But they agreed that photographs and detailed documentation of the piece should be preserved with Eleanor's other papers, ensuring that future scholars studying her teaching methods could understand how her philosophy had been applied even in her final artistic creation. As they prepared to leave Tetbury, William took one final walk through the village where he had spent so many transformative afternoons as a teenager. The familiar streets and buildings carried layers of memory, reminders of the young person he had been when Eleanor first introduced him to the healing power of artistic expression. The walk felt like a pilgrimage, a way of honoring both Eleanor's memory and his own journey from that grieving adolescent to the man he had become. The memorial service had provided closure while also opening new possibilities. William understood that his public acknowledgement of Eleanor's influence represented more than personal tribute. It was a statement about the importance of arts education, the value of unconventional teaching methods, and the need for public figures to maintain authentic connections to the experiences that shaped their character. That evening, back in their private residence, William and Kate hung the collaborative painting in a place of honor where their children would see it daily. When George, Charlotte, and Louis asked about the beautiful artwork, their parents found themselves sharing stories about creativity, mentorship, and the importance of remaining open to the people who might teach you unexpected lessons about life and art. The painting's presence in their home would ensure that Eleanor's influence extended into the next generation, that her understanding of art as a bridge between hearts and minds would continue shaping the royal family's approach to public service and private authenticity. William realized that Eleanor's greatest lesson might have been showing him that true legacy lies not in what you accomplish individually, but in how effectively you pass along the gifts you've received to others who need them. 6 months after Eleanor's memorial service, the ripple effects of William's heartfelt eulogy had spread far beyond the small church in Tetbury. News of the prince's deeply personal tribute to his former art teacher had captured public imagination in ways that neither William nor his advisors had anticipated. The story of their relationship, from his grief-stricken teenage years to their final collaborative painting, had resonated with people worldwide who recognized the universal themes of mentorship, healing, and human connection. What began as a private farewell had evolved into a broader conversation about the role of arts education in supporting young people through difficult times. Teachers, parents, and mental health professionals reached out to share their own stories of how creativity had provided pathways through trauma and loss. The response validated Eleanor's lifelong belief that art could serve as a bridge between isolation and community, between pain and healing. Kate noticed the change in William most clearly during their private moments together. His comfort in speaking publicly about emotional topics had increased markedly since Eleanor's memorial. The experience of delivering such a personal eulogy seemed to have given him permission to bring more of his authentic self into his official duties, creating space for vulnerability within the formal structures of royal responsibility. The collaborative painting had become a focal point for their family life, generating countless conversations with their children about creativity, learning, and the importance of finding mentors who believe in your potential. George, Charlotte, and Louis were fascinated by the story of their father's artistic education, especially the idea that painting could help people process difficult emotions and connect with others across generational differences. William had begun incorporating Eleanor's teaching methods into his own interactions with young people during official visits. When meeting students facing challenges similar to his own teenage struggles, he often spoke about the therapeutic value of creative expression, encouraging them to explore art, music, writing, or other forms of creativity as tools for emotional processing and self-discovery. The most significant development had been William's decision to establish the Eleanor Hartwell Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to providing arts education and creative therapy programs for young people experiencing trauma, loss, or mental health challenges. The foundation represented the practical application of Eleanor's teaching philosophy, creating structured opportunities for the kind of healing relationship that had shaped William's own development. Kate had taken a leadership role in developing the foundation's programming, drawing on her background in art history and her years of observation about William's relationship with creative expression. She understood that the foundation needed to honor Eleanor's specific methods while adapting them for broader application in schools, youth centers, and mental health facilities. The foundation's first pilot program had launched in 3 schools within disadvantaged communities, providing trained art therapists who could work with students using Eleanor's approach of combining technical instruction with emotional support. Early results were encouraging, with teachers reporting improved behavior and academic performance among participating students, along with increased willingness to discuss personal challenges and seek help when needed. Sarah had become an informal advisor to the foundation, sharing Eleanor's teaching materials and helping to train the new generation of instructors who would carry forward her methods. The cottage in Tetbury had been preserved as a kind of informal museum and training center where educators could experience firsthand the environment that had nurtured William's artistic development and emotional healing. During one of their regular visits to the cottage, now scheduled monthly to support the foundation's work, William and Kate discover a box of Eleanor's journals that Sarah had recently found while organizing her aunt's papers. The journals contained detailed reflections on her teaching philosophy, specific observations about working with traumatized students, and personal thoughts about the relationship between creativity and emotional development. Reading Eleanor's private thoughts about their relationship proved profoundly moving for William. She had documented their early sessions with clinical precision, noting his initial resistance to emotional expression, his gradual willingness to experiment with different artistic techniques, and the moments when breakthrough understanding seemed to occur. Her observations revealed the deliberate thought process behind seemingly spontaneous teaching decisions. More touching were Eleanor's expressions of gratitude for what she had learned from William about resilience, responsibility, and the particular challenges faced by young people living under intense public scrutiny. Her journals revealed that she had considered their relationship one of the most rewarding experiences of her teaching career, not because of his royal status, but because of his willingness to engage authentically with the artistic process despite his emotional pain. The journals also contained Eleanor's hopes for how their relationship might influence William's future approach to leadership and public service. She had written extensively about her belief that leaders who understood the healing power of creativity would be better equipped to connect with people facing their own struggles and to develop policies that addressed human need rather than simply political expedience. Armed with these insights, William began incorporating specific elements of Eleanor's philosophy into his official speeches and public advocacy. His remarks about mental health awareness increasingly emphasized the importance of creative expression as both therapeutic tool and communication method. He spoke about art's capacity to help people process trauma in ways that traditional therapy alone might not achieve. The public response to Williams' evolving approach was overwhelmingly positive. Mental health professionals praised his understanding of the connection between creativity and emotional well-being. Arts educators found themselves with increased support for programs that had previously struggled for funding and recognition. Parents of children facing emotional difficulties reached out to express gratitude for Williams' validation of non-traditional approaches to healing and growth. One particularly moving response came from a teenage girl whose letter described how Williams' story about Eleanor had encouraged her to pursue art therapy after experiencing family trauma. She wrote about finding her own version of Eleanor's studio in a community center art program, where she had learned to express feelings through painting that she couldn't articulate through words alone. Her progress from isolation to engagement mirrored Williams' own journey decades earlier. The foundation expanded its programming to include intergenerational workshops that paired young people with older adult mentors, recreating the dynamic that had proved so beneficial in William and Eleanor's relationship. These sessions brought together teenagers facing various challenges with retired teachers, artists, and other adults who could provide both technical instruction and emotional support within a creative environment. Kate often participated in these workshops, bringing her art history expertise while learning from both the young participants and their mentors. She was consistently amazed by the speed with which creative collaboration could break down barriers between people of different ages, backgrounds, and circumstances. The workshops validated Eleanor's belief that art could serve as a universal language capable of bridging any gap between human hearts. As the first anniversary of Eleanor's death approached, William found himself planning a commemoration that would honor both her memory and the continuing influence of her teaching. Rather than a formal memorial event, he envisioned a celebration of creativity that would demonstrate the ongoing vitality of Eleanor's educational philosophy. The commemoration took the form of a public art exhibition featuring work created by students in the Foundation's programs alongside pieces from Eleanor's personal collection. The exhibition, titled Hands Across Time, Teaching, Learning, and Healing Through Art, opened in a London gallery that had volunteered space to support the Foundation's mission. Williams' opening remarks at the exhibition focused on the continuing nature of Eleanor's influence, the ways her understanding of art as healing had continued spreading through new relationships and creative collaborations. He spoke about the courage required to be vulnerable in artistic expression and how that same courage could transform approaches to leadership, education, and community building. The centerpiece of the exhibition was the collaborative painting that William and Eleanor had created together, displayed alongside documentation of their final artistic session and excerpts from Eleanor's journals about their relationship. Visitors could read Eleanor's own words about the importance of creating safe spaces for emotional expression and her hopes for how art education might contribute to broader social healing. The exhibition attracted visitors from around the world, many of whom shared their own stories about mentors who had shaped their lives through creative encouragement. Teachers brought students to see examples of the Foundation's work, while parents sought resources for children facing various challenges. The gallery became a gathering place for anyone interested in the intersection of art, education, and emotional development. Among the visitors was the architect who had spoken at Eleanor's memorial about her influence on his professional development. He brought his own children to see the exhibition, sharing stories about their grandmother figure Eleanor and her belief that creativity could flourish in anyone willing to approach art with openness and courage. His family's presence connected the exhibition to the broader community of people whose lives Eleanor had touched throughout her teaching career. The exhibition's success led to invitations for the Foundation to expand its programming internationally. Educators in countries facing various social challenges expressed interest in adapting Eleanor's methods for their own contexts, creating opportunities for cross-cultural exchange around the universal themes of creativity, mentorship, and healing. William began traveling to these international programs, sharing Eleanor's story while learning about different cultural approaches to arts education and emotional support. Each visit reinforced his understanding that Eleanor's insights transcended specific cultural contexts, that the human need for creative expression and supportive mentorship was truly universal. During one particularly meaningful visit to a refugee education program, William met a young boy whose circumstances closely mirrored his own teenage experience with loss and displacement. Working alongside local art therapists trained in Eleanor's methods, William watched the child gradually open up through painting, expressing experiences that trauma had made too difficult to verbalize. The encounter brought William full circle in his understanding of Eleanor's legacy. Watching this young refugee discover the same healing potential and artistic expression that had sustained William through his own darkest period, he realized that Eleanor's greatest gift might have been showing him how to recognize and nurture the capacity in others. As the second year after Eleanor's death began, William reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had emerged from what initially seemed like a simple farewell visit. Eleanor's influence had expanded from their private relationship to become a foundation for broader social change, demonstrating the far-reaching impact that individual teachers can have when they approach education as an act of love rather than merely information transfer. The foundation continued growing, establishing programs in dozens of communities while maintaining fidelity to Eleanor's core insights about the relationship between creativity and emotional healing. Each new program created opportunities for the kind of transformative mentorship that had shaped William's own development, ensuring that Eleanor's understanding of art as bridge between hearts would continue influencing future generations. Kate often observed that Eleanor would have been amazed by the scope of influence that had grown from her small cottage studio in Tetbury. But William understood that Eleanor had always grasped the potential for individual relationships to create ripple effects far beyond their immediate boundaries. Her journals contained numerous references to her hope that students she had taught would carry forward her methods in their own interactions with young people facing challenges. The collaborative painting remained in William and Kate's private residence, continuing to serve as a daily reminder of Eleanor's teaching about the courage required for authentic expression. But its influence had spread through countless reproductions and adaptations, becoming a symbol for the Foundation's mission and an inspiration for educators worldwide who recognize the power of creative collaboration across generational divides. As William looked toward the future, he understood that his relationship with Eleanor had prepared him for a lifetime of similar connections with young people who needed encouragement to explore their creative potential. Eleanor's greatest lesson might have been teaching him to recognize teaching opportunities in unexpected places, to approach each interaction as a chance to provide the kind of supportive mentorship that could transform lives. The farewell that had begun as a personal goodbye had evolved into a celebration of the continuing nature of human influence, the ways that love expressed through teaching and learning creates connections that transcend death and continue inspiring new generations. Eleanor's legacy lived not just in memories or foundations, but in every moment when someone chose creativity over despair, vulnerability over defensiveness, connection over isolation. Her gentle embrace that had comforted a grieving teenager had become a metaphor for the kind of compassionate leadership the world needed, the understanding that strength includes rather than excludes the capacity for tenderness, creativity, and authentic human connection. William carried forward her teaching by embodying those qualities in his public service, ensuring that Eleanor's influence would continue moving millions of hearts toward greater openness, creativity, and love.